Tonight, we'll drift softly into the quiet night of the Aztec world, where the great island city rests within the lake, and the air cools gently after the warmth of the day. And if you find comfort in wandering through these calm places, you can subscribe and return whenever you like. But for now, there is nothing to follow, nowhere to be, and nothing required of you, except to let the slow rhythm of this night carry you quietly toward rest. The long stone causeways that connect the island to the distant shores have emptied of footsteps, and their surfaces, still holding traces of the day's warmth, begin to release it into the dark air as a faint breeze travels along their length, brushing past the low walls and slipping between the buildings where lamps glow dimly behind woven screens. Across the water, the canoes are tied loosely to wooden posts, rocking just enough to tap softly against stone in a patient and repeating rhythm, while the lake itself presses gently against the edges of the city with a sound so steady and calm it becomes part of the silence rather than a break within it. In the chinampas beyond the city, the floating gardens lie dark and quiet, their narrow channels reflecting only fragments of the night sky, and the crops that stood bright and green in the sun now appear as still silhouettes, leaves heavy with the dampness that gathers when the heat fades and the earth begins to cool. Inside the homes, evening routines continue in a way so familiar they require no thought at all. Hands rinsing clay bowls with small, careful movements, woven cloths folded and placed neatly aside, sandals aligned beside sleeping mats, and the low murmur of voices drifting gently through reed walls before settling into silence. A cooking fire collapses slowly into glowing embers, releasing a faint scent of maize and ash that lingers in the courtyard, and someone pauses in a doorway to feel the cooler air touch their face before stepping inside, where the warmth of the room waits quietly. Further along the narrow streets, a dog shifts in its sleep and resettles, claws scratching softly against packed earth, for a moment before the sound fades again into the stillness that now covers the city, like a blanket drawn slowly upward. The temples rise above the sleeping neighborhoods, their stepped outlines dark against the sky, and though they tower over everything in daylight, at night they seem like mountains belonging to the land itself, silent and unmoving as the stars pass overhead without hurry. A faint breeze moves through the open plazas, stirring dust into small spirals that travel only a short distance before disappearing again, and the banners that fluttered there during the day now hang limp and forgotten, resting as completely as the people below. Near the market square, the wooden stalls stand empty and orderly, baskets stacked, mats rolled, goods covered carefully with cloth for the night, and the echoes of daytime voices feel very far away, replaced by the steady hush of insects hidden between the stones. The canals carry sound differently after dark, stretching the smallest ripple into a long, slow whisper that drifts between buildings, so that the city seems to speak softly to itself in a language made entirely of water and distance. A lantern sways gently in a doorway along the causeway, its light rocking back and forth in a slow arc, painting the wall beside it with a warm glow that moves without urgency, like a pendulum marking time. Within a shaded courtyard, someone adjusts a woven blanket, pulling it closer around their shoulders, and the rustle of fabric fades into breathing that grows deeper and more regular as sleep arrives quietly without announcement. The lake beyond the city has become a broad sheet of darkness, smooth and unbroken, and the sky above it stretches wide and calm, so that water and air seem to merge into one continuous space, where the world feels larger and quieter than before. In the chinampas, the damp soil releases a faint earthy scent, and small insects settle along the edges of leaves, clinging motionless as the night air cools around them, while the narrow channels between the gardens grow still enough to mirror the stars. A canoe drifts slightly in its mooring and taps again against its post, the sound echoing softly into the darkness and then fading, leaving only the gentle lapping of water that never quite stops and never quite changes. The city breathes in this rhythm now, slow and steady, as if every home and pathway and rooftop shares the same quiet pulse, rising and falling together, in a calm that spreads evenly across stone and water alike. A child turns in sleep on a reed mat, the faint shift of weight pressing softly into the woven surface, and a parent's hand rests nearby, unmoving but present, part of the quiet reassurance that fills the room without words. The great stairways of the temples hold pockets of shadow where the air feels cooler, and a small night bird lands briefly on one of the steps before lifting off again without sound, leaving the stone exactly as it was before. Along the outer edges of the city, where water meets land, the reeds bow slightly in the breeze and rise again, repeating this small motion over and over, as if practicing a slow dance that no one needs to see. In the market square, a loose piece of cloth lifts at one corner and settles again, moved only by the faintest current of air, and the woven fibers catch the dim light before returning to darkness. The homes grow quieter still, as breathing deepens, and conversations dissolve into silence, and the lamps inside burn lower and lower, until they become small points of orange in rooms otherwise filled with shadow. Above it all, the sky stretches wide and steady, unchanging, and the stars move so slowly that their progress can only be felt, not seen, marking the passage of time in a way that asks nothing from anyone below. A faint ripple travels across the surface of the lake, barely visible, but gently widening as it moves, touching the edges of the city before fading again into stillness, as though the water itself is settling into rest. Somewhere a wooden door shifts slightly in its frame, with a soft creak as the night air cools the hinges, and then it too becomes silent, blending back into the steady calm that surrounds everything. A breeze carries the faint scent of wet soil from the gardens, mixing with the smell of stone and water, creating an air that feels heavy but comforting, like a familiar blanket laid across the city. The pathways between homes lie empty now, their packed earth smooth and undisturbed, and the shadows that fill them feel deep and soft rather than dark, inviting quiet rather than caution. In one courtyard, embers glow faintly red in a clay hearth, their light barely reaching the edges of the space, and the slow collapse of ash sends a tiny swirl upward before disappearing into the night air. The causeways stretch outward in straight, patient lines, vanishing into darkness, where the land waits unseen, and for now no one walks them, leaving the city gently suspended between water and sky. A small insect traces a wandering path along a wall warmed earlier by the sun, its movements slow and deliberate, pausing often, as if unsure whether to continue or rest. The quiet is no longer something that surrounds the city, but something that fills it completely, settling into every space between buildings, along every canal, across every garden, until there is no part untouched by its calm. And as the night deepens further, the Aztec city rests fully within itself, surrounded by water, held by darkness, and wrapped in the gentle repetition of routines completed and tomorrow patiently waiting, while there is still nothing to follow, nowhere to hurry, and only the quiet comfort of this place at night, without needing to change at all, because nothing here is in a hurry, and nothing here is waiting to begin again. And the city seems content simply to exist in this quiet space between yesterday and tomorrow, where the air feels thicker and softer, and every surface has settled into stillness. The water presses gently against the edges of the stone once more, the same patient sound repeating itself over and over without variation, as if the lake has found a rhythm it prefers and sees no reason to interrupt it. And this steady lapping becomes something that fills the silence rather than breaking it. A faint current moves between the canals, barely strong enough to disturb the reflections resting there, and the narrow channels carry this small motion slowly through the city, so that even in stillness there is the feeling of something drifting without destination. Inside the homes, the warmth of the day has finally faded from the walls, leaving the air cool and even, and sleeping figures rest more deeply now, their breathing slower and more regular, matching the quiet rhythm of the water outside. A woven curtain lifts slightly in a doorway and falls again, stirred by nothing more than the smallest change in temperature, and the movement is so gentle it feels less like motion and more like the settling of fabric into comfort. The embers in a clay hearth collapse inward with the softest sigh, sending a faint glow briefly upward before returning to darkness, and this small fading light leaves the courtyard feeling even calmer than before. Far along the causeway, where the stone meets open water, the surface of the lake lies perfectly smooth, reflecting a dim scatter of stars that seem to rest there as peacefully as the city itself. The reeds at the edge of the chinampas bend once more and rise again, repeating the same slow bow they have made all night, as if the plants themselves are following a quiet routine that requires no thought and no effort. A canoe drifts a finger's width from its resting place and returns again, tapping softly against its post, in a motion so familiar it has long since stopped being noticed, becoming part of the background calm that wraps around everything. The narrow pathways between homes feel deeper now, filled with shadow that no longer looks dark, but simply soft, like cloth laid across the ground, to muffle even the idea of footsteps. Somewhere a sleeper turns slightly and settles again, the faint rustle of woven matting lasting only a moment before disappearing back into the steady hush that surrounds the room. The temples remain still above it all, their outlines unchanged against the sky, and in the darkness they no longer feel tall or imposing, but simply present, like shapes that have always belonged. Exactly where they are. A small insect crosses a wall, warmed earlier by the sun, pausing often, as if unsure whether to continue. Its slow wandering path matching the unhurried pace of the night itself. The air carries the faint scent of water, soil, and cooling stone, blending together into something that feels familiar and grounding, as though the entire city is wrapped in the same gentle breath. And as this quiet continues, unchanged and uninterrupted, the Aztec city rests even more deeply within itself, surrounded by water, held by darkness, and cradled by the calm repetition of night that asks nothing from anyone at all.